going to check really fast on Facebook and make sure we're there. Sometimes I get nervous. I'm like, it looks like we're there. And then sometimes we're not there. So I think we are, and we are. So thank you so much for joining us today. We are here on the GCBN platform. We have Transformation Tuesday every Tuesday here on the GCBN platform. You can catch us in the Facebook group and page. You can catch us on LinkedIn, and we're also streaming on YouTube. So we're excited to have those platforms ready and available for you. You can share the call out later on. We have today two amazing women with us. We have Renee Koster and we have Rachel, and I'm so sorry, I'm probably going to mess up your name. I'm so sorry. Bochat. Did I do it right?
Close. It's Bochet, but it looks like
Bochet. Yeah, Bochet, and they are here with the Gwinnett Good News Club. They have a ministry that is amazing. They're going to share with you that today. Renee's topic is shift, turning influence into eternal impact, and I can't wait to hear about that. But first, we're going to go over the shift acronym because we're trying to make sure that we don't miss anything. Because Miss Beth, we want to do well for her, and so we know that every year God gives Miss Beth an acronym. And it's so cool. The very first time I met her, when she presented, she had an acronym. And it's great because you can remember what she's talking about. You can write the word down. She's going to go through the different words of what God's giving her. And that acronym speaks. And so for the last several years, actually many years, we've had an acronym. And this year, the acronym is SHIFT. And I want to cover that. If you were at the gala, you got our bookmark. It's also on our website. You can check that out. But the S in SHIFT is surrender stale systems. That's talking about your belief system, your operating system, your regulating system, and your navigating system. All of those systems encompass you as a person. And so that's what we're shifting. We're shifting to surrender the stale systems that are no longer working in our lives, in our business, and all of those facets. So that's the S. We've covered those, and we're going to start back again at the latter part of the year. We're going to go over those again. So you'll hear it again, but it's going to be really neat because at the end of the year, these parts of this acronym, it's just going to naturally flow throughout your mouth. It's incredible to see it on the platform every Tuesday, on the platform on Living Well Wednesday, and even when we have presentations throughout. Our presenters, of course, sometimes they're told, hey, will you cover this particular topic? But other parts of the acronym come out, which is so cool. The H is heighten our heartbeat for him. We want to be so in tune with God that our heartbeat is heightened to exactly what he wants for us. Exactly what should come out of our mouth is exactly what he would want us to say or to speak to that person about him. So heightening our heartbeat for him. The I is, and this is part of what we're talking about today, ignite intentional and influential impact. That sounds like a lot, and it kind of is, but you want to ignite and you want to be intentional about your influence and your impact. And that is with who you're hanging with, but who you're influencing, right? And so I'm sure Renee is going to cover some of that today, and we can't wait to talk about that. The F is faith forward, future focus, but then we have forgive. Some of us get stuck in the forgive. Some of us are, I'll get rid of all this other thing and ask for forgiveness for all this other thing. But this one thing I have to hang on to. We have to trust him with that one thing. We have to give it to him. And I'm speaking personally for myself. Maybe you guys don't have issues with that. But in order to be able to have our faith forward and our future focused, we have to have some forgiveness. And then it's not all going to be just happy and go. It's not going to all go and flow exactly how you want it to, but you have to start with that forgiveness, and then God's going to work that out for you. So if you're stuck, check on the forgiveness part first, and then see what happens. And then the T, transition truth to trust. So we know that's a lot, but we want to cover that because the SHIFT acronym is important. It's going to come back up in those different facets. But today I want to introduce you to Renee. Renee, go ahead and take it away. Let us know who you are. Let us know your GCBN story or whatever you want us to know about GCBN. And then I'm going to get us on the groups.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lisa. So excited to be here today. I always enjoy, I usually watch the Transformational Tuesdays on replay because it doesn't usually fit my schedule. But I love the information I get and how varied it is from different focuses, right? Different perspectives. And I think that is just very impactful. I am so invested in GCBN. I love the overall theme, bringing God back into business, because wow, that's just the opposite of how society is today. So I love the opportunity to interact with other nonprofits and other for-profit businesses and see how God is working in their organizations and see how trade ideas about how we can be better stewards with the opportunities that God has given us. So, as Lisa mentioned, my name is Renee Koster. I am the local director for Child Evangelism Fellowship for Gwinnett and Forsyth counties. And our ministry is going into public schools and hosting after school Bible clubs. And we like to joke that Good News Club is the best kept secret in the area, because anytime I tell somebody about that, they're like, wow, how can you do that? Isn't the separation of church and state or whatever? We can do that because it's an after school program, parental permission. And if the school lets the Boy Scouts in, they also let us in, and to provide equal opportunity. And so we are just so excited that God gives us the opportunity to interact with these students. Many of these students are unchurched and be an influence. And as Lisa said, that will be the influence and impact will be the focus of our discussion today. And I am joined by Rachel Boucher. Rachel is very new to our organization. She is our what's your official title?
Is it ministry operations manager or something like
I
that?
think so. Yeah. So Rachel's one of the backbone. She does our accounting, all of our IT. We couldn't live without Rachel in this technical society. And so we're really excited that God brought her into our circle. And she has, just in the 3 months that she's been with us, she has been so impactful to our organization.
That is so awesome. So I have to just take a pause and say, um, I got saved older, and I think I've shared this before when you've been on platform before, Renee, with the Good News Club, is that it is important for us as Christians, as Jesus followers, to reach these kids exactly where they are as soon as we can. Because the longer that they stay away from the Lord, or the longer that it takes them to reach the Lord, not that he can't do some things with them, but they're going to have some junk in their trunk like I did. Okay. I was 22, 23 years old, stationed in Germany as an airman. That's when I had an encounter with Jesus. These kids, they're encountering Jesus in their school with permission, but they're able to change the trajectory of their life because of what these ladies are doing. So kids are big in my heart. I have a huge heart for ministry and missions, but kids, that's my jam. And so I'm excited to be here today with you guys.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. So with that, I'll kick it off. As Lisa mentioned, our topic today is turning influence into eternal impact. And I think a lot of people, when they hear the word influence, they immediately think of someone that's got a large platform or an impressive title or a huge audience, maybe a CEO or a pastor of a large church, or all these social media personalities now. But that's not where the real impact is made. Through Good News Club, what I've seen is people changing the trajectory of these children's lives forever, just like Lisa was mentioning. Um, the volunteers, we currently have over 300 volunteers that faithfully serve in the schools every week during the school year. They go into the schools, they learn the children's names, they listen to their stories, they pray with them and hand out snacks. They tie their shoes, they encourage them, and they keep showing up week after week. And through those small acts of faithfulness, God does extraordinary things. And so the truth is that every one of us has influence. Whether you're leading a business, which is a lot of the focus of GCBN, or raising children, or serving in your church, or mentoring employees, caring for aging parents, or just interacting with people that God puts in your path every day, you have an influence. And Jesus told us in Matthew 5 that we are the salt of the earth and the light of the world. And he didn't say those with the biggest platforms are the salt and light. He said, you are. And so Jesus was focusing on everyday people. He wasn't talking to people who had prominence. He was talking to everyday people. And he calls us to faithfulness so that we can use our influence for his kingdom. And each one of us has people and opportunities that God has entrusted to us. And so the question isn't whether we have influence, but what are we doing with it? And I like to share this story. It just really touches my heart because it just shows how influential Good News Club can be in a whole family's life. Probably about, wow, it was before COVID, so maybe 7 years ago now, at our Good News Club at Grayson Elementary. One of a child in, I believe she was in 4th grade, trusted Christ as Savior. And a few weeks later, her little sister did the same. And the leader, the head volunteer at that club, took the opportunity to talk to the mom in carpool line about what her daughters had done and invited her to come to church. And the mom started coming to church and brought the girls with her. And a few months later, the mom was saved. Well, the dad was estranged from the family at that time. Eventually, the family got back together, and a few years later, the father was saved as well. So we saw from that investment of that club, and specifically that volunteer who went to the effort to invite the family to church, that whole family was impacted. And so we never know what seed that we plant, what seed that we water, how God is going to grow it. So it's up to us to plant those seeds, and then we leave it to God how He's going to turn out that story. And a lot of times we don't know what happens. It's going to be fun when we get to heaven to see the endings of some of these stories that we have planted. So Lisa, I'd like to ask you, who's influenced you spiritually or professionally? And what was it that made them influential?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to take it way back, which I had already mentioned being in Germany, but I had attended this church for a very long time. I say very long time for me. I mean, months. But you guys are going to be like, I am so sorry for asking this question to you, but I literally, and this is just the truth of it in my testimony, I would be clubbing on Saturday and I would go to church on Sunday. And there was a singles director and his wife that was there that loved me to Jesus. They didn't slap me with the Bible. They didn't condemn me for clubbing it up on Saturday. They probably didn't even know. Maybe they smelt it. I don't know. But they just loved me to the Lord. They continued to encourage me. They continued to, show me. I would ask questions and they would take the time, to take scripture and show me where, those questions would be that I'm asking. And even to today, like that is a single point in my life that I know because of their impact in my life and how they loved me to Jesus, not how they beat me to Jesus, not how they condemned me to Jesus, but how they actually cared for my spiritual state, but also my heart state. And that was a huge reason for me to be able to come to the knowledge of Christ. And so that, and even to today, like I mention them so often. I don't get to talk to them all the time, but just even like in how I deal with my children, how I do business, how I show up at church, like it is from that pivotal point in my life there. So I don't know if that was helpful or even answered your question, but
that's very helpful.
Yeah.
Because it was somebody who invested in you.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, like you said, one single moment. It was the week after week, the consistency
Yeah.
of investing in you. That's great. That's a
Yeah.
great story. So, Rachel, since you're newer to the ministry, what stood out to you about the culture and influence of Good News Club?
Well, when you meet someone and you think you know who they are, but you don't know who they are until you get to know them more. So I was introduced to Good News Clubs years ago when I was in high school, kind of worked with backyard Bible clubs. So, I'm thinking of this idea in my head, and then I come and I see the back workings of it all, and I'm amazed because there is so much grace wrapped up in this culture, especially among the team. I love being a part of this team and the influence of Good News Club. Again, just seeing these people who come in day after day, they're just faithful where they're at. Like Renee said, they're not big social media influencers. Nobody probably knows their name except for their immediate people and friends, but those kids know them and they know those kids. And so that's really stood out to me as I'm entering into this new position.
So, as you've seen just in the what we've discussed so far, influence happens through relationships. And I love what Paul wrote in 1 Thessalonians 2:8. He said, "We are pleased to share with you not only the gospel of God, but also our own lives." I love that phrase, our own lives. Paul wasn't simply coming in and beating them with doctrine. You got to believe this, you got to do this. He was investing in them. He modeled his faith. He encouraged and he corrected gently. He walked alongside the people as he was teaching them. Just kind of like Lisa was, very similar to what Lisa was just sharing. And it wasn't just his that church, his relationship with Timothy. Right? Timothy had been taught the scriptures by his mother and grandmother from an early age, but Paul invested in Timothy through a relationship that lasted probably the rest of their lives. I know they didn't have the telephone or a text to communicate, but I'm sure Timothy remembered, and through those precious letters that we have as part of our New Testament now, how much Paul invested in him and made a difference in his life. And so we see that relationships, authentic relationships, are what change people. And I like what we do in Good News Club. The volunteers learn the children's names. They ask them about their week. They celebrate their victories. Oh wow, you made an A on that test that we prayed for last week, right? We let the children submit prayer requests. And so we like to follow up and see how God answered those prayer requests. And we let trust develop with those children. And so over time, those relationships have huge impacts. And the same things happen in business. I know probably most of the people who are watching this right now aren't working with children, they are working in their business. But the same thing happens there. Employees respond to people who genuinely care, and coworkers remember people who invested in them personally. People matter. Programs and systems matter, but relationships are what change lives. So I love that how we see God working in those relationships. Um, so, Rachel, how have you been able to to influence others just in your support role? Because uh, you aren't in the Good News clubs every week, but we couldn't do those clubs without you. How have you been able to apply your influence?
Well, I think just in my first few months, I've gotten to see a golf tournament that the team put together, and then also a training for our coordinators. And I see them coming together, and I'm doing some of the behind the scenes things. And I know every part matters, right? None of those things would go smoothly if we didn't all play a part, even the ones that are not seen. And so I think in those supporting roles, ways you can influence others is just being faithful where you're at and doing your part, because so many times your part is a part of the bigger part, and it's huge. And I was just thinking when we were when I was looking over this stuff for this live, I was thinking about the story of Helen Keller. If y'all know who Helen Keller is, she was blind and mute, and she just was in a horrible place. And then Annie Sullivan came in and helped teach her and guide her and help her learn the language of Braille and all of that. But when Helen Keller was asked, who was the most influential person in your life? She said Annie Sullivan, 100%. And Annie corrected her and said, no. Actually, the most influential person in your life is a chambermaid that was in the facility where Annie Sullivan was as a child. They didn't realize that she couldn't see, and so she was kind of uncontrollable. They put her in a cage by herself. This floor maid came across her and started baking her brownies and just bringing her brownies and just taking care of her and kind of connecting with her in a very practical way. And that's how they found out she was blind. And they were able to move her into a place where she could kind of come out of that. And then she became a teacher, and she was Helen Keller's teacher. And the most influential person in her life was someone that does not have a name. We don't know her name, but she was a floor maid. And so I think about that no matter where you're at. No matter what role you play, you have influence. And I think we should see ourselves as such.
That's a lot. I had never heard that story. I remember I loved the story of Helen Keller as a child, but I'd never heard about the chambermaid that was a part of Annie Sullivan's story. That's awesome. That's awesome. Uh, so our next principle is this: small investments compound over time. That goes beautifully with what Rachel just shared with the baking of the brownies, because that didn't happen the first time she baked brownie, probably, or the second or third. It's probably the 30th or the 40th that they realized that that Annie was calming down and they could see what her true disability was. Zechariah 4:10 says, "Do not despise these small beginnings." So we don't want to dismiss things as insignificant. Maybe one conversation or one invitation, one encouraging text, 1 hour of volunteering, or one act of kindness. God specializes in multiplying small offerings. I love the story of the boy with the 5 loaves and 2 fish, something that he saw as completely inadequate to feed thousands of people. But in Jesus' hands, it was more than enough. And so we can see how eternal impact starts small, but maybe one child after school, one employee that you're mentoring, one difficult conversation handled with integrity. Those difficult conversations really stand out to me. I remember some difficult conversations I've had on both ends, being the one who had to have the conversation and the one who received the conversation. And those that were handled well really made an impression on me. So when we see those little beginnings, those aren't little to God. God multiplies those just like he multiplied the loaves and the fishes, and he sees the bigger picture and makes it into a bigger influence often as we go along. So Lisa, I wanted to ask you, have you seen examples of small acts of leadership or encouragement that ended up having a big impact?
Yeah. So I can just think back to my husband and his story. And I think he's got a book inside of him and maybe a training course, and he spoke on the GCBN platform, but he's a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. He wasn't always a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. When we got married, he was a staff sergeant and I was a staff sergeant. But he commissioned, went to officer training school in 2007 and became a butter bar lieutenant. When he became a captain and went to a new duty station, he had a commander there that he went to and said, "Hey, I'd like some mentoring." And that commander pretty much blew him off and was like, "We don't do that on the officer side." And he was just taken back. Like, how do you grow? How do you learn? How do you, impact those around you? How do you become an influence or influence others? Or who's influencing me? And so Thankfully, there was a change of command and a new commander came in. And my husband spoke with that commander because it was his boss. And they have like an initial feedback session. And he said, well, I asked the previous commander about mentorship. Do you do that? And that commander took him under his wing. It was like, absolutely, we do that. We mentor, we train, we, we come alongside each other and we, because you can't grow by yourself. And so that commander was pivotal in my husband's life as a captain to help him to get to where he is today, which is 3 ranks above to now a lieutenant colonel. And so my husband, every day in his job and even at home, he mentors, and little mentoring opportunities, little mentoring moments. He sends out a mentoring Monday email every Monday, and he may not get comments back or whatever, but it's reaching his, his audience. But he has about 80 something people underneath him that he commands. And I see it every day that I go there. Just little nudges, little high fives, little, hey, you're doing great, little notes on his desk that people have left him because he's made an impact in their life. And I think that had he not had that commander that came alongside of him to teach him that mentoring moment, it could have been a different story. But God wasn't done with him, and he's not done with him now. But when you say that, that makes me think of that story, and just how he's intentional to make people feel important, how he helps and mentors them, how he has opportunities and provides those for the people around him. And so that's what made me think of that.
Yes, and that leads to great into our next principle, which is that influence requires intentionality. And wow, I love how that is woven through your husband's story so beautifully. He learned, and now he's practicing that intentionality, and that ties us back to the SHIFT acronym as well. If we think about Deuteronomy 6, God tells the parents that they have to teach their children diligently, that they have to talk to them every day. You remember they would have the laws on their head and on the doorpost, and it was woven into every aspect of their daily life. And that shows us that discipleship doesn't happen accidentally, just like in Lisa's husband's story. And we see that in lots of stories in the New Testament as well. Barnabas was a very intentional mentor. He encouraged Paul when others were hesitant. I can imagine when people first met Paul, here's the guy who used to kill Christians and throw them in jail, and now we're supposed to embrace him. Barnabas was one of the ones that was the first to embrace him and encourage him and help Paul develop into the great leader that he was. And later, Barnabas also invested in John Mark when other people had written him off because he had abandoned one of the missionary journeys, and people were like, oh, he's a quitter, we're not going to invest in him anymore. But Barnabas invested in him. And so we see from the stories in the Bible and stories that we see around us, how important that intentionality is. If we are all so busy, if you don't make it a point to be intentional in your investment in people, it's not going to happen. You're going to get another email, you're going to have to answer another phone call, you're going to get distracted. And so you have to be intentional in your investment, intentional in developing a healthy culture in your business, intentional in creating that lasting influence. And one of the ways that we're intentional in Good News Club is with our training. Rachel mentioned that we just recently had a 2-hour training for we call them our club coordinators. So each Good News Club has anywhere from 5 to 10 volunteers, depending on how many students are in that club. And then, but you have to have a leader, somebody to keep everybody organized. So we had a 2-hour session with our club coordinators to help them be better leaders. And then in August, we will have a 4-hour training for each of our individual volunteers. All 300 of them have to go through training every year. And we work to invest in them to make sure they have the skills they need to be effective leaders of these children and to effectively develop these relationships. You don't naturally necessarily know how to disciple a child. Okay. You don't necessarily you don't know how to present the gospel. We show them very simple ways to present the gospel, and we actually practice in our gospel class. So we invest in those volunteers to make sure that they are equipped to go into the Good News Clubs and be intentional in their investment in the children. And they see, because we were intentional in our investment, we have modeled what we want them to do when they interact with the children. And so they see that culture in us, and people watch what we celebrate. You talked about your husband sending out emails. We send out emails to our volunteers. We share stories about children. We share numbers. Numbers aren't everything, but wow, when you see that we had over 100 children saved in Good News Club last year, that's certainly something to celebrate. They see what we celebrate, and that encouraged them to celebrate similar things. They watch how we as staff members respond under pressure. We always have things go wrong, right? Everybody has things that go wrong. This year, we're facing a new challenge in that Gwinnett County has decided to charge us for meeting space for our clubs. Even though we don't charge the children to attend, it's free to them. They decided that we had to pay, and we understand the rationale behind it. They said they had to be consistent with all of their outside organizations, but that was tens of thousands of dollars that wasn't in our budget. And we didn't panic. We didn't say, oh, we're gonna have to shut down half the Good News Clubs. We trusted God, and we just completed a fundraiser where people partnered with us, and we have now raised enough money to pay all of those fees. So people see how we handle pressure, and they can model that when they face similar pressures. So Rachel, I'm going to ask you, what intentional practices have you noticed that we use to develop a healthy culture in our ministry?
I love that you were talking about the verse in Deuteronomy. It says, teach them diligently. And when I think about that, and I think about, the phrase that says where it's like lessons are mostly or more caught than taught. And they're watching, especially children, or if you're in your business has an ethos or culture. It just describes everything about you, your belief system, everything. And it usually comes out in how you are leading the way, even those lower down, how they are leading the way. And I think one of the biggest practices that I've seen in ministry and in business is transparency and genuineness. Like if you are open, especially when you're talking about children, if you kind of give them a peek into your struggles or just something simple like, I struggle with fear, then they immediately like, oh, I'm not the only one. Thank goodness someone understands. And I think that is one of the biggest practices that I think would be helpful in ministry, in a job, in business, and anything, is just being transparent and genuine in your interactions with one another as you get down to their level, and you teach, but you teach with your actions more than with your words.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's that old expression, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And you show that with your actions for sure. So our final principle today is eternal impact requires faithfulness. Galatians 6:9 says, let us not lose heart in doing good, for in due time we will reap if we do not grow weary. And I think a lot of people expect immediate results. Oh, I shared the gospel and nobody responded. um, or I did this great, nice thing and nobody noticed. Well, we want visible fruit, but the influence really unfolds over years, not days. And if you think about Daniel, he served faithfully in Babylon through many changing circumstances, through changing leaders. He faced many trials, many temptations to abandon his faithfulness to God, the pressures of the pagan society. But he was faithful to God and touched kings and kingdom. And of course, at the later in his life, when he refused to stop praying, even though the king had been tricked into passing the new law that everyone had to pray to him, Daniel said, I'm not going to give it up. I'm going to keep doing it. And what an influence he had by being faithful. Not only did he impact that king, because the king said, obviously, um, the the God who saved Daniel from the lions is the true God. But here we are, thousands and thousands of years later, teaching that story to children. And so, faithfulness to God, in the little things and in the big things, and knowing that even if you don't see the results immediately, God is doing the work with what you do. So I don't know about you guys, um, but I remember the Bible verses I learned as a child much better. I still try to do Bible memory, but it's so much harder now. But I remember those verses I learned as a child. So we might not know those children who 20 years from now will say, "Oh, yeah, I remember that verse I learned in Good News Club." Um, we had a couple of clubs this year that really tracked how the kids learned their memory verses that we give them each week. And they had several kids that learned every single memory verse, and they gave them a big, like an Olympic medal at the end of the year to celebrate. Um, but wow, faithfulness in teaching those memory verses that those kids will be able to use their entire life. That is so that's so great for me to think about. And faithfulness matters in business, right? Being consistent. Rachel talked about being transparent. Being consistent and transparent lets people see who you are and builds that relationship. So all of these topics that we've talked about today interact. The faithfulness, the transparency, the consistency, um, and seeing how God is going to take small actions and compound them over time. It's
Renee.
faithfulness is so much more important than visibility. What were you
When
going to
you
say,
were
Lisa?
when you were talking, it reminded me of the verse in 1 Corinthians 3:6, where Paul talked about, I planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase, or God gave the growth. And that sometimes, especially with kids, but even in your business, you may plant that seed. Somebody may come behind you and water that seed, but God is ultimately going to be the one that grows that seed and that sees it to fruition. So we just have to keep planting and keep watering. You never know who's coming through your path that has already had a seed that's planted, but because of your words, you're watering that. And you may not
Yep.
see the fruit of that, but you may be the one that's watering it or planting it. And I just think that that's so important. So when you said that, that reminded me of the planting,
Yes.
which is so important.
Yes. Yes. I love how the Bible has all of these illustrations. It's not just that we can draw the pictures in our mind, just like you said. That's great. So one of the reasons I love serving in Good News Club is I get to watch this faithfulness every day. And people don't realize our volunteers are impacted, I think, just as much or more as the students. Nothing teaches you. You learn more by having to teach a lesson. If you've ever had to prepare a lesson, um, the I've had people share with me, wow, when I really dug in and prepared dug in and prepared for that lesson, I learned so much. And then we see people, we're a non-denominational organization. So we have people with all sorts of backgrounds coming together, partnering together, working together to reach these children because we all have the same goal to share Jesus with these children, to help them understand the gospel, to disciple them after they're saved, and to just invest on them and love them because children today, so many of them come from broken homes, and we can be a place of safety, somewhere they can share their hearts and they can be loved on, and just plant those seeds, just like you were talking about, Lisa. I love that. Um, and I just see God doing amazing things for us going forward. We've already got two new Good News Clubs opening up in the fall, and we're hoping to get a few more. God keeps opening doors, um, and I see God just doing a lot of things for us in the future. Um, so I'd like to wrap up and ask people. I know we've talked a lot about kids, but I've tried to show how all these principles also apply to businesses. But think about if you're a business leader, who has God placed in your sphere of influence? Because you don't have to be some big shot. God, you're influencing people every day. Who has God placed in your sphere of influence? And what kind of culture are you creating? Even if you're not the leader of your business, you're contributing to the culture. So what kind of culture are you creating in your business, in your family, in your nonprofit, wherever God has placed you? You're contributing to that culture. What is that culture? And third, what small faithful investment could you make that God could multiply for eternity? So that could be being encouraging to an employee. It could be mentoring a young believer at your church. Could be praying for someone. It's simply showing up faithfully in the place God has already assigned to you and uh, doing the work that He has laid before you. And that's going to have an eternal impact that you may not ever know. I'm going to be excited when we get to heaven to see what God has done with all of these things. So don't underestimate your influence. Don't despise small beginnings, and don't grow weary in doing good because God sees what you're doing and He's going to be the one that waters it, just like Lisa was saying. So that is what we had to share today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Renee. I forgot to tell you, I want you to think about, I'm going to do announcements now, but at the very end, I'm going to turn it back over to you to give us just one send off. It can be a phrase, something you've already mentioned, something God tells you, just something for us to be able to just do or walk away with. We will
Okay.
share the Good News Club information on the Facebook side. So those of you that, want to connect that way, also the website. As Renee already shared, they have volunteers, right? So maybe you want to sign up to volunteer. Maybe you want to start a club, connect with them and see how we can undergird them and help them to be able to keep spreading God's word to these children. And also Renee has shared so many amazing ways to apply this to your business. So maybe you have a friend in business that needs to hear this today. Go ahead and share that out. Go ahead and let your people hear, what's going on today. I will share our announcements. I'm going to share my screen right fast. I got to find myself here. Okay, here we go. I'm going to share. Maybe I am. Yeah, there it is. Okay. I have the screen minimized there, so I couldn't find the thing. I do want to share. Vicki Jumper had shared on Facebook, which is very important, but the statistics for kids, right? So 85% of Christians accept Christ before their 14th birthday. By age 13, the youth has already formed the majority of their beliefs about the nature of God, the afterlife, and reliability of the Bible. as cited by Child Ministries and Child Strategies. This sounds like a wonderful ministry for our children. It's important to reach them young, it's important. And it's important to invest in them, even though we reach them, to continue to invest in them while they're teenage years as well. So we don't want them to walk away from the faith after they have graduated. We want it to be so saturated and a part of their life that God is just with them and they know it and they're seeing him. And that goes back to the transparency that Rachel said. When we're being transparent, we can't walk around as Christians like we have it all together, because we don't. We don't have it all together. And so maybe we don't share all the ugly, but we can share that we also have fears. We also have things that we're dealing with. And if our kids or our nieces or nephews can see that as well, but how you're walking with God through that, that's important. So over here on our Facebook page, you can see that we're live. Hi, everybody. We want you to check out our Facebook page. We also have a Facebook group. It is the same name with, I think, LLC on the back end, I think. But our Facebook page and our Facebook group, if you go to the More tab here, you'll see events. Click on events, and Rose does a great job of making sure that we have all of our events lined up for you guys out here. If you click that you're going, Facebook will give you an invitation to that group and a notification in your feed 1 hour prior. Okay. So you'll be able to not miss one, right? You'll be able to know. Every Monday we have prayer at 9 o'clock Eastern time. Renee Salvery has been leading that call, leading that prayer call. Miss Beth is away for June. She's taking some bereavement leave, as we all encourage her to do, and to be able to process and to be able to just be right now. She sends her love, and we are so thankful for your prayers for them, your support for them. We do have a graphic pinned on the page here if you want to sow into the ministry and help them in that way. But if you have any questions or concerns or anything about GCBN, please reach out to myself or Rose. We'll be able to help you. And until she returns, we'll be holding down the fort, and we're glad to do that. Every Tuesday, we have a Transformation Tuesday at noon right here on Zoom. If you are a member, if you're not a member, you can become a member, and you can find out how to do that at gcbnetwork.com. And that has our member opportunities. Membership has benefits. And so we're excited that to have those opportunities. I'll share that as well while we're here. One of the amazing benefits is that we have a directory right on our website. If you're a member of GCBN or a sponsor of GCBN, you can connect with other members here. We can go find Renee, and she's here because she's a GCBN member, and there's Renee right there with her contact information. So you can join us as a member or a sponsor. Let's see. We also have Living Well Wednesday, formerly known as Wellness Wednesday, but now it's Living Well Wednesday. We have a panel of amazing women who are coming to share how you can be well in your life. We have Jessica Banner, who is coming from a counseling background. And we also have Dr. Chi, who's coming from a wellness perspective. We have Julie Mills Watson, who also is coming from a wellness perspective. She wrote a book. Her husband had cancer and passed away, and she shares about how you can have a better quality of life by eating well, taking care of your body, exercising, and those kind of things. And so she comes with that authority to speak to us on the platform. We also have Christine Oswald, who is also a counselor. And we also, of course, have Beth. And at the end of the month, we have Shantane, and she comes and wraps everything else in a nice bow and kind of recaps our Living Well Wednesday. And for the end of the month, she wraps it all together. So we want you to be on the lookout for that. Next week, we have Delisa Brown on the call with us for Transformation Tuesday. We're excited to do that. And then we will also have Pamela Bridgman back with us on Living Well Wednesday for next week. So she was on our Wellness Wednesday panel, and she has some books that she's been writing. Of course, she has her practice, and she is a certified LCSW, I think, counselor. And so she'll be here on the Living Well Wednesday panel she will be the panel next week. So we're excited about that. We have our quarterly meeting coming up for networking. So if you are a member or if you're not a member, this is an opportunity for you to come together. Of course, there will be a training piece for you, but it is also an opportunity for you to network and connect with other members or people who may not be members yet. We have Jason Davis, who is Jericho Force. We call him Mr. Fortify, speaking from the wellness side. Speaking from the wealth side, right? For financial peace. And we also have Vicki Jumper, who is the owner of Southern Comfort Hospice. And she's going to be speaking also on that day. That's July 18th, 9:30 at Cornerstone in Lawrenceville. So we hope that you guys will join us. You can register now for that, get your ticket. You can click that link and it'll take you to the ticket. I have to share God Golf and Girls. If you have not been to God Golf and Girls, it is a weekend retreat. We start out Friday night, we have Saturday, and we have Sunday. There's a little piece of golf. So I don't want you guys to hear God Golf and Girls and then tune it out like I did, because I was like, I don't golf, so I'm not going. Golf is just a small piece of it. We have speakers throughout the weekend. It is going to be triumphant. It is going to be therapeutic, and it is going to be transformational. It is an opportunity for you to come and pour into yourself. You can come as a business or as a person. It is for women only. And we also have on our website a tab for that for God Golf and Girls. Not to make anybody nervous, but it's only 58 days away. 58 days away, and we are in August, and we will be at GGG at Lake Lanier having the best time of our life. And so if you haven't gotten your ticket yet, you can do that. You can find that on our Facebook page. You can find it on our website. You can reach out to Rose or myself, and we'll help you to be able to connect and get that taken care of for your ticket. So it covers your room and board. It covers your food. It covers your conference entries for all of the speakers. And if you guys know Beth and Jess, like we know Beth and Jess, they give things away, like good prizes. And so there's those opportunities as well. I think that's all of the announcements. I'm going to turn it back over to Renee for our final words. And Rachel, thank you for joining us today. And Renee, thank you for presenting. And we just look forward to connecting again, right? And seeing you guys out there in the real world doing God's work. And thank you for what you do.
All right. Thank you, Lisa. So I'll say for our send-off today, embrace the influence God has already entrusted into you and use it for his glory and for eternity. You've got influence, so embrace it and use it.
That's so good. Thank you so much, ladies. I hope that you guys have a great rest of your week. And we are praying for the Good News Club and all that you're doing. And so we're here if you need anything. Let us know. And those of you on the Facebook side and watching the replay, let us know that you're here so we can see you and we can interact with you. And we did put the Good News Club website and Facebook link over there on the Facebook side so you guys can connect with them, go like their pages, go interact with them. And if you have any questions or want to set up a chapter, or what do you call it? A club, then let them know so they can help you out. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, Lisa.